Hello and welcome to Tokenomics. I'm Manisha Gupta. Namaste Web3 is designed to introduce Web3 to India and showcase its many benefits. This week's event focused on India's G20 Presidency and potential opportunities for India in Web3 sector. The topics discussed included the need for a regulatory framework and opportunities that Web3 can bring to India. So how can India capitalize on the Web3 opportunity to achieve the $1.1 trillion growth projections by 2032? Here's my conversation with Baijayant Jay Panda. He's Vice President of BJP.
India's presidency of the G20 comes at a very opportune time. In recent years, particularly since the pandemic, the image of India has dramatically changed around the world. Even as we transition into becoming a middle-income country, we showed leadership to the world. We rolled out the biggest ever vaccination campaign in the history of the world. We helped more than 100 countries with hundreds of millions of vaccines, and some of which were developed in India itself. So that respect has gone up tremendously. India today is acknowledged, not just in the G20, but across the world, as a key player in shaping the major decisions that the world needs to take. And so technology, of course, is a very important part of this. This has come up. The world of technology is changing at an even more rapid pace than we've seen it do. And there are challenges. There are enormous opportunities, and there are enormous dangers of some of these technologies. And so it's a good thing that at this moment in history, and there is one more transition that's happening, in terms of the regulatory environment, the India that we knew traditionally was a follower. We'd wait until bigger countries in terms of economic size and more technological clout would take a decision, and then we would start implementing them. But over the last decade or so, you've started seeing that India is beginning to feel comfortable with its new sort of self-assuredness of starting to take some of the cutting-edge decisions itself. And I think we can talk about that as we go along.
Well, yes. So, that exactly was my next question, because while we are waiting to do a collaborated standard of procedures internationally, but we have seen other countries like perhaps US, Europe, Hong Kong, Singapore do come out with some basic laws when it comes to virtual digital assets rather. India really seems to be lacking there.
I think we need to understand that there are three issues that are very relevant to the question that you just asked. Number one, India has certain special challenges that most of these other countries don't have. So we have a challenge of terrorism, which has in the past operated through unaccounted cash, illicit printing of currency, cross-border smuggling. And I don't think it comes as any surprise to anybody to realize that illegal activities and criminal and terrorist activities rely on some of these new technologies to bypass the scrutiny of the authorities. And so India's challenge is far more than what a US might face, the drug smuggling cartels using some of these technologies for hiding their loot. But in India, it's not just a question about tax evasion. We have that too, because we are still transitioning into a country where the tax net is wide enough. And to widen the tax net, again, in the past, there have been traditional ways that people have evaded taxes. There are modern technological ways that people evade taxes. So we have these challenges. And as I mentioned to your earlier question, we are transitioning. I often use the phrase that New India today is well along the path of transitioning from what I used to call diffidence to confidence. Perhaps from our colonial experience, for many decades after independence, we used to hunker down, we used to seal off our economy. Now that has started changing. Indians are flourishing all over the world. Indians are flourishing in India as well. And so we are stepping up to make some of these decisions much more rapidly than we used to in the past. I gave the example of Vaccine Maitri. That couldn't have happened That massive rollout couldn't have happened without the use of technology and without the use of without policymakers taking decisions to facilitate that. So when it comes to policies or regulatory environment for cutting edge technologies which involve crypto or which involve blockchain, we have challenges that other nations don't have. But I want to leave my answer to this question with a thought that you shouldn't think that Indian policymakers are closed-minded. Caution is sometimes called for in blockchain technologies, in crypto. Even countries that don't have these challenges of terrorism and massive tax evasion, see what happened to FTX. So in hindsight, a little bit of caution is probably not unreasonable.
We get your point, sir. While the regulatory aspect is much awaited, we do understand that this is an ever-evolving technology. What we started 5 years ago and what we've done on a yearly basis with NFTs and DeFi, decentralization, yielding of cryptocurrencies, I mean, something has been coming in every year. When you make regulations, would you say that this time around, perhaps, whatever regulations are made will need to keep changing as we move ahead?
The need for regulations to get updated is much more today because of the speed at which technology is changing. Now, you talked about NFTs. I want to use an anecdote. You know, when I was referring to you in your earlier question to older methods of tax evasion and other illicit practices, do you remember certain famous politicians suddenly becoming artists and selling their paintings for many crores of rupees? Now, can you imagine how much easier that would be to do if NFTs, besides whatever their natural market value is, were suddenly to trade in favor of certain individuals for huge sums of money? So, you know, there are real issues that one needs to think about. I think the reality is that our effort at being up to date is being bootstrapped much more rapidly. Look at the policy making engagements that are taking place between government, between industry, between technocrats, and between startups, which even, I mean, you may think that this is still a bit not as fast as it ought to be, but compared to just a few years ago, there's been a rapid change. And I'm very confident that in the coming months and the coming years, you will see a much greater capacity and capability of the regulators in India to keep up and take necessary decisions.
So you talked about the startups and entrepreneurs, and the last couple of years have seen a lot of talent drain happen from India because of lack of clarity here. You know, people are waiting that tell us whether you're doing it, not doing it, give us a time frame, because we've seen a lot of companies which launched in India now operating out of Singapore or a US or a Hong Kong for that matter, Dubai even.
No, I think what you're pointing out is a real issue, but we should see this in a larger context. So for example, quite a significant number of individuals, not companies, have been taking up residency abroad for a variety of reasons. In the past, it used to be because there weren't opportunities in India. They used to go abroad for jobs or for further career. But in the recent decades, it has been about tax arbitrage. It has been about regulatory environments which are easier to deal with. Now, the reality is, a small island nation or a small free port entrepot which doesn't have democracy, where people can take decisions quickly, can in fact take very rapid decisions on regulations. That can be great, it can be very fast, but it can also have other consequences down the road. I think this is recognized that we need to provide a level playing field so that entrepreneurs, startups don't feel that even though their market is India, even though their talent pool is India, even though their technologies are now increasingly being developed in India, they need to be incorporated in one of these other free ports or island nations. It's something that we need to recognize and find solutions for.
So I have one more question, and this is after various summits that we do and a lot of people that we engage with on ground, that this is one community that the government doesn't engage with, with all stakeholders when it's about policy making or feedback or on ground with the kind of funding that's coming in, the many thousands of developers that we have in the country. What is the engagement level that the government has with the private players or exchanges right now?
So I would say that this is a work in progress. Now, if you see, similar kinds of concerns used to be raised by other sectors, by traditional industries. But you may see now that it's a pretty regular practice for government. For example, leading up to the budget, the finance minister had wide-ranging consultations with all kinds of industry, with large industry, the traditional big names, with startups, with sectors that are both either new, manufacturing, services, technology. So this is much more so than used to be the case in previous years and previous decades. Now, as far as the tech sector is concerned, as far as something like blockchain and Bitcoin is concerned, this is really the cutting edge, the bleeding edge, if you will, of the regulatory questions that need to be answered throughout the world in all jurisdictions, as we've just been talking about. So I think you are beginning to see a level of consultation that is more than what used to be before, and I'm sure it will keep on increasing, so that, if you mirror what is happening with other sectors, you will see that there is a recognition by this government, which was not the case earlier, that all, I'll give you an example. A decade or so ago, more than a decade ago, when the companies law was amended, as soon as it was amended, everybody was up in arms because there had been no consultations. There were completely arbitrary clauses in there, which many corporates just figured that was unworkable. So from day zero, it was a controversy, and it lasted for several years before corrections could take place. I think today you are seeing a change in that attitude. There is a recognition that before regulations are finalized, there will be consultations. Now, every decision will not be to the liking of every stakeholder, but in a country like India, we will keep up, we will change as necessary. And as I said, even if you make perfect regulations today, it will be out of date in 1 year. So
maybe before that.
let's not, as they say, make the perfect the enemy of the good. Let's accept good developments in the regulatory environment, even if they are not perfect, with the belief that it's an ongoing process, we can keep improving it.
All right. That is Jay Panda, Vice President BJP, telling us that the consultations with the private stakeholders is rising and is on, and will perhaps see better of that going forward. And let's not make the enemy of a perfectly good technology out there. But with that, let's slip into a short break. We'll speak more about the Web3 opportunity on the other side with Srinath Sridhar.